A poor backpacker saves a woman trapped in a snowstorm, unaware she's a billionaire heiress who will change his life forever. Do not fall asleep. If you fall asleep now, you might never wake up. I am so cold. Please do not leave me. The wind screamed through the trees, whipping snow in every direction like a blinding white curtain. Jack stumbled forward, his scarf frozen stiff against his face, boots crunching through the knee-deep drifts as he fought to stay upright. His hands were numb, and every breath burned in his lungs. He should have stayed in his tent, but something in the distance had caught his eye. An odd shape just off the mountain pass, and now he was sure. It was a car. Half buried in snow, turned on its side, one headlight still faintly glowing through the storm. Jack's heart pounded as he reached it, brushing away the layers of snow covering the driver's window. Inside, he saw her. A woman slumped over the steering wheel, her face pale, her lips tinged blue. Blood trickled from a cut on her forehead. She wore a luxurious winter coat, though now soaked and clinging to her like a shroud. Her hand hung limp from the wheel, a diamond bracelet glinting faintly in the fading light. Jack pounded on the glass. "Hey, can you hear me? Miss?" No response. Without hesitation, he reached into his backpack, grabbed his multi-tool, and pried at the door until it gave way with a groan. Frigid air poured in. Jack crawled inside, reached for her wrist, weak pulse but still there. He looked around. No other passengers, just her. He slid his arms beneath her and pulled gently. She moaned faintly but did not wake. He cradled her against his chest and carried her through the snow, slipping and staggering under her weight. The cold bit deep, but he did not stop. His tent was half a mile away, downhill, sheltered between two ridges. He reached it minutes later, breathless and shaking. He shoved open the flap and laid her carefully on his sleeping bag. The tiny stove was already lit, barely keeping the air inside above freezing. He stripped off her wet coat, then wrapped her in the dry blankets and his thickest jacket. He rubbed her hands, then her arms, trying to coax warmth back into her limbs. "Stay with me," he murmured. "You hear me? Stay with me." Her eyelids fluttered, just slightly. She whispered, barely audible, "So cold." Jack reached into his emergency kit, found the heat packs, and activated them. He slipped them into her clothes, near her core, behind her neck, under her arms. Then he hesitated only a second before unzipping his own coat and slipping into the sleeping bag beside her, wrapping his arms around her trembling form. "It's okay," he said quietly, his lips near her ear. "You're safe now. I won't let anything happen to you." Outside, the wind howled on, relentless. Hours passed. Jack kept checking her breathing, her pulse, her color. She stirred occasionally but never woke fully. He rationed his water, melted snow to keep her lips damp, kept the stove alive with dry twigs he had stashed days ago. The storm showed no signs of slowing. He could not help but study her face. Delicate, high cheekbones, long lashes, the kind of beauty that did not belong to these brutal mountains. Who was she? What was she doing out here alone? There were no answers, only the storm and her shallow, precious breaths. In the darkest part of the night, she opened her eyes. Only for a second, but in that second she met his gaze, her lips parted. "You saved me." Then her eyes closed again. Jack swallowed the lump in his throat. "Yeah," he whispered. "But you're going to have to save yourself, too. I'm not letting you die out here." He held her tighter, feeling the warmth beginning to return to her skin. Outside, the storm roared. But inside the tent, for now, there was a flicker of hope. When she finally woke again, it was morning. The storm had passed, leaving the world outside silent and heavy with snow. The sun filtered weakly through the tent's flap, casting a pale light across her face. Jack was crouched nearby, boiling water over the tiny camp stove. Her voice was soft and hoarse. "Where am I?" Jack turned quickly. "Hey, you're awake." She blinked, confused. "Who are you?" "Jack," he said. "I found you. Your car was flipped over on the mountain road. You were half buried in snow." She looked down, seeing layers of unfamiliar clothes and blankets wrapped around her. Her fingers twitched. "You saved me?" "I guess so," he replied, handing her a small tin cup of warm water. "You've been out for nearly 2 days. You had a fever last night. Do you remember anything?" She took the water, her hands trembling slightly as she drank. Her face was pale, her forehead still bruised and swollen, but her eyes were more alert now. "My name is Claire," she said after a moment. "I think I was driving. There was a deer. I swerved. The car must have rolled. My phone, it wasn't working. That storm knocked out every signal tower up here," Jack said. "I couldn't get a call out either. We're pretty far from everything." Claire looked around slowly. The tent was cramped but dry. Simple gear was neatly stacked in the corners, and she was resting on layers of blankets and sleeping bags that clearly belonged to him. Everything smelled faintly of pine, smoke, and cold air. "You've been out here with me the whole time?" Jack nodded. "I didn't really have a choice. You were too weak to move, and I couldn't carry you far. Figured it was safer to wait it out here." Something in her chest tightened. "Thank you." Jack shrugged. "Don't mention it. Just glad you're okay." For the next couple of days, they stayed in the tent as snow blocked any chance of travel. Jack made simple meals from his supplies, canned beans, instant noodles, dried fruit, and shared everything with Claire. He made jokes to lighten the mood, taught her how to warm her hands properly, even gave her his only pair of thick socks when hers were still wet. Claire, used to silence and sterile luxury, found the rugged rhythms strangely comforting. She asked about his travels, and he told her about the towns he had passed through, the people he met, the mountains he had climbed. In return, she offered only bits and pieces about herself, careful, vague, enough to keep things light but never too revealing. But there was something in his presence that made her feel safe, not just physically, but deeply, quietly safe, like she could breathe. On the third night, the wind returned, not as fierce as before, but still sharp and moaning through the trees. Jack noticed Claire shivering, despite the layers of blankets. "You cold again?" he asked. She nodded, her voice barely audible. "A little. My head hurts." He moved closer, checking her forehead. It was warm, too warm. "You've got a fever again," he muttered, worry darkening his face. He lit the stove, boiled more water, gave her a painkiller, but her body kept trembling. Her breath grew shallow and her skin flushed. "We can't let your temperature keep climbing," he said. "This is going to feel weird, but it's the only way I know to bring it down." She opened her eyes slowly. "What do you mean?" Jack zipped open the sleeping bag. "Direct body heat. I've done it before during mountain rescue training. You just have to trust me." She hesitated only a second. Then she nodded. Jack climbed into the sleeping bag beside her, wrapping his arms around her carefully, his larger frame curling protectively around hers. His body was warm, steady, and she instinctively pressed closer. He spoke softly, calming her breathing. "You're going to be all right. Just stay with me." She closed her eyes again, but this time not from weakness, from comfort. Outside, the snow fell quietly once more. Inside the tent, two strangers shared warmth not just from the cold, but from something deeper, something that, though unspoken, had already begun to grow. The distant hum of a helicopter broke through the silence on the fifth morning. Jack stepped out of the tent, shielding his eyes from the sun's glare as it reflected off the snow. A search team in bright orange parkas emerged from the trees, waving and shouting as they approached. Claire was still weak but conscious, bundled inside the tent with fresh tea in her hands when they arrived. "We've been looking for you for days," one of the rescuers said, kneeling beside her. "Your family's been going out of their minds." Jack stood a few feet away, watching as they examined her, wrapped her in thermal blankets, and placed an oxygen mask gently over her face. Claire kept glancing at Jack, wanting to say something, but everything moved too fast. She was lifted into the chopper before the words could leave her lips. All she managed was a final look back, her eyes locked with his, full of something raw and unspoken, and then she was gone. Jack stood in the snow, hands shoved into his jacket, the sudden silence around him louder than the storm had ever been. Claire woke 3 days later in a hospital suite, with large windows and the scent of lilies in the air. Her body ached, but her memory had begun to return in vivid flashes. Trees, ice, headlights, the crash. She was Claire Rowan, heiress to the Rowan Group, one of the largest luxury development conglomerates in the country. She had been traveling alone, inspecting the site for a future mountain resort. a private retreat for the ultra-wealthy. The road had been icy, the deer had appeared from nowhere, but those memories faded into insignificance next to one face, Jack. The man who had found her in the snow, given her warmth, protected her without ever asking who she was or what she had. He had saved her life, and then she had disappeared without a word. Her heart felt heavy with guilt, and something else, something deeper. A week later, Claire sat in her office high above the city, surrounded by glass, chrome, and endless emails. Her assistant, Maya, stepped in, holding a tablet. "Investors are asking for your statement on the Aspen project. They want to reschedule." "Not now," Claire said sharply. "I need you to do something else." Maya hesitated. "What is it?" "I want you to find someone." Maya blinked. "Okay, who?" Claire turned her chair toward the window, voice softer now. "His name is Jack. I do not know his last name. He is a backpacker, probably mid to late 20s. He saved me after my accident. He was camped near Ridge 6 off the Western Trail." "That is not a lot to go on." "I know," Claire replied, "but I need to find him." The next few days became an obsession. Claire skipped meetings, ignored calls, even missed a private gala her mother insisted she attend. She reviewed every search report from the rescue team, cross-referenced park permits, spoke directly to mountain rangers. Maya watched with concern. "Claire, people are starting to notice." "Your father, let them notice," Claire interrupted, frustration flickering in her voice. "They were not the ones lying in the snow, freezing, about to die. He was. He was there." She paused, her voice trembling. "And I never even said thank you." That night, she sat alone in her penthouse, wrapped in a blanket, staring out at the glowing skyline. Her eyes brimmed with tears she had not let fall in public. "If I do not see him again," she whispered into the quiet, "I will regret it for the rest of my life." Behind her, Maya quietly stepped out of the room, determination on her face. She would find him. For Claire, and for the quiet truth everyone could see, this was not just about gratitude. It was love. Growing quietly beneath snow and silence, now burning too bright to ignore, Jack had returned to the road, his backpack once again slung over his shoulders, boots caked with dust and snow, moving from town to town like he always had. But nothing felt the same. The mountains were still beautiful, the silence still soothing, but his mind kept drifting back to that storm, to the woman with trembling hands and soft eyes who had whispered her name like it was all she had left. Claire. He did not know her last name, had no way to reach her, no idea if she even remembered him, but her memory clung to him like the lingering cold of that night, refusing to fade. One afternoon, just outside a small mountain town, Jack was eating a simple lunch on a bench when a black SUV pulled up in front of him. Two well-dressed men stepped out, their suits pressed, their eyes cold. "Jack?" one of them asked, though it was not really a question. Jack nodded slowly, his guard already rising. "Who's asking?" The man handed him a sleek envelope. "A token of appreciation for what you did." Jack frowned and opened it. Inside was a thick stack of cash, more than he had seen in years. He closed it again without a word and looked up. "Who sent you?" "Someone who prefers to remain anonymous," the man said. "Someone very grateful, but also concerned. Ms. Rowan's world is delicate, complicated. You were never meant to be part of it." Jack stood, jaw clenched. "I don't want her money." "We're not asking you to take it for the money," the man said calmly. "We're asking you to take it and walk away." Jack's voice was low. "Tell whoever sent you, keep the money, and stay out of my life." He tossed the envelope onto the bench and walked away. But the men didn't stop watching. In the days that followed, Jack noticed things. A man with a camera pretending to read a newspaper. A black car parked across from the cheap hostel he stayed in. Whispers in town. Eyes that turned quickly away when he looked up. They were watching. They were waiting. And then, one evening, as he made his way through a narrow side street after picking up supplies, they struck. 3 men stepped out from behind a delivery truck, blocking his path. One of them cracked his knuckles. "You were warned," he said. Jack turned, but another stood behind him. He barely had time to brace himself. A fist slammed into his gut, another caught his jaw. He stumbled, caught off guard, tried to fight back, but they were too fast, too practiced. He hit the pavement hard, blood on his lip, hands scraping against the gravel. "What does a guy like you think he's doing?" one hissed, grabbing Jack by the collar. "You think you belong with her?" Then came the screech of tires. A silver car skidded to a halt just feet away. The door flew open and a woman leapt out. "Stop!" Claire's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Get away from him!" The men froze. Claire ran to Jack, dropping to her knees beside him. Her designer coat fluttered in the wind, but she did not care. Her hands cradled his bruised face as she looked up at the men, fury blazing in her eyes. "Touch him again," she said through clenched teeth, "and I will destroy everything you work for." They hesitated, then stepped back. Jack coughed, blood on his lip, staring at her in disbelief. "Claire?" She nodded, eyes already welling. "I found you." She pulled him into her arms, trembling. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know they'd do this. I've been looking for you everywhere." Jack, still dazed, let her hold him. Her warmth was familiar, real. Claire whispered, "I should have told you who I was. I was scared, but I'm not running anymore. I'm here. And I'm not leaving without you." And for the first time since the snow melted, Jack felt something he had not felt in weeks. Safe, wanted, home. Snow fell again, thick and heavy, swirling through the air like a memory repeating itself. Claire dropped to her knees in the alley, her arms wrapped tightly around Jack's battered body, her tears hot against the icy wind. Blood ran from a cut on his cheek, smearing against the sleeve of her designer coat, but she did not care. "I'm here," she whispered over and over, her voice cracking with emotion. "I'm here, Jack. I found you." Jack, still catching his breath, stared up at her in disbelief. Her hair was damp with snow, her cheeks flushed from the cold and panic, but her eyes were the same ones he had watched flicker open inside that tent, and they were filled with fire. The men who had attacked him took a step back, uncertain now. Claire turned slowly, her voice rising with fury. "Who gave you permission to touch him?" she shouted, her words sharp and deadly. "Who told you to hurt the man who saved my life?" They stood in silence, the storm howling around them. "I don't care if my father ordered it or the board or anyone else," she continued, her voice trembling with rage. "If I ever see any of you near him again, I swear on my name. I'll walk away from my family, from everything, forever." No one moved. No one spoke. Claire turned back to Jack, brushing his hair gently from his forehead. "I'm sorry," she whispered again. "I should have come sooner. I should have protected you." Jack sat up slowly, his body aching. You remembered everything?" She nodded, eyes glistening. "Yes. I remembered the car, the snow, the crash. I remembered your voice telling me not to sleep. I remembered your arms around me, keeping me alive." Jack looked at her, his voice low. "And when you remembered who you were, did you remember who I am too? Just a backpacker? Just a nobody?" Claire leaned in closer, cupping his face with both hands. "You are not a nobody. You are the man who showed me what it means to be safe, to be seen. You gave me something no amount of money ever could, your heart." Jack blinked, unsure what to say. Claire took his hand in hers. "I don't care about the world outside. Let them talk, let them judge. I'm not giving you up." He held her gaze, heart pounding beneath the bruises. "You're not scared of what comes next?" "I'm terrified," she said softly. "But I'm more scared of never feeling the way I feel when I'm with you." Jack swallowed hard. "Then let's do it." "Do what?" "Face it, together, all of it." Claire smiled through her tears. "Together." They helped each other up, still holding on, as the snow continued to fall around them. The men who had attacked Jack slowly retreated, melting into the storm. Claire didn't even look at them again, because in that moment there were only two people who mattered. Two hearts, bruised but beating, wrapped in each other's arms, standing firm against a world that had tried to tear them apart. Let them whisper, let them doubt. They had found something rare, and they were not letting go. The headlines came fast and loud, plastered across newsstands, homepages, and social media feeds like wildfire. Heiress and her hero, billionaire Claire Rowan, linked to mysterious backpacker. Cinderella in reverse. Rowan heiress chooses love over legacy. Jack who? The man who stole the Rowan heiress's heart? Claire had expected attention. She'd prepared herself for whispers and curious glances, but she hadn't anticipated the sheer brutality of it. The media circus became suffocating. Reporters camped outside her building day and night. Paparazzi chased her car through the streets like predators, their flashes constant, their voices invasive. Even respectable business outlets published speculative op-eds questioning whether her emotional instability would affect investor confidence in Rowan Group. The press labeled Jack everything from a mystery man to an opportunist. They dug into his past, his lack of pedigree, his nomadic lifestyle, trying to make sense of how a woman like Claire could ever fall for a man like him. Her parents were livid. "You're destroying everything we built," her mother spat one evening, her fingers trembling around a crystal glass. They sat in the dining room of the Rowan penthouse, the city sparkling far below their feet. "You've embarrassed the family. Your name was a brand, Claire. Now it's gossip fodder." Her father's disappointment was quieter but sharper. "You're not just our daughter, you're an executive, a leader. You were raised for this life. You think love excuses walking away from your responsibilities?" Claire listened, not with defiance but with calm resolve. She let their words fall like stones into the silence, waited for the echoes to fade. Then softly but firmly she said, "If I have to choose between the fortune you built and the man who saved my life, I choose him." They stared at her, stunned, but she meant every word. Meanwhile, Jack tried to keep his head above water. The city, the media attention, the lavish events, they were not his world. He wore the suits Claire's assistant picked out, stood beside her during press appearances, shook hands with executives and smiled through it all. But inside he was suffocating. He missed the forest, the quiet, the honesty of people who didn't care what name you carried or what you were worth. Every time someone handed him a flute of champagne or asked which hedge fund he worked for, he felt the walls close in. He never said a word to Claire. He didn't want her to feel like she had to choose. But the cracks showed. The breaking point came at the Rowan Foundation's annual charity gala. The ballroom was a masterpiece of elegance, chandeliers glittering overhead, gold-edged menus, an orchestra playing softly in the background. Claire wore an emerald green gown that shimmered like starlight when she moved. She looked every bit the heiress, every bit the woman they wanted her to be. Jack stood at the edge of the room, watching as she mingled with donors, laughed politely at jokes, posed for photos. She was brilliant, gracious, untouchable. Someone approached him, holding a glass of scotch. "Which firm are you with again?" the man asked casually. "You look like Westmont, or maybe one of those boutique startups." Jack didn't answer. He couldn't. He turned, walked toward the exit, slipped out the side door, and kept walking. The rain had started falling, soft, misting down like sorrow. Jack loosened his tie, shoved his hands into his coat pockets, and walked down the empty street, each step heavier than the last. He felt foolish, out of place, like a ghost in someone else's dream. Claire noticed his absence almost immediately. She searched the ballroom, her smile fading as she scanned the crowd. When she learned he had left, she didn't hesitate. She ran. Out into the rain, the silk of her gown clinging to her legs, her heels clicking on the slick pavement. Her hair was already soaked, mascara streaking down her cheeks, but she didn't care. "Jack!" she cried, her voice breaking the stillness. He turned, startled, his heart clenched at the sight of her, drenched, breathless, radiant even through the storm. "Claire, what are you doing?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the rain. She stopped in front of him, panting. "You walked out." "I don't belong there," he said simply. "In your world." She shook her head, tears mixing with rain. "Don't you get it? I don't want that world without you. I'd give it all up if I had to." Jack looked away. I don't know who I'm supposed to be in all of this." "You're supposed to be you," she said, reaching for his hands, gripping them tight. "That's who I fell in love with." He stared at her, stunned by the fierceness in her eyes. She took a breath. "I'd rather live in a cabin with you, wake up to the sound of birds, drink cheap coffee and warm my hands by a fire, than be a queen in a palace with no soul. I'd rather live a simple life with you than be a lonely queen." Jack didn't speak. He just pulled her into his arms, holding her close, letting the rain fall over them like a blessing. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not headlines, not fortune, not legacy. Only love. Only them. After that night in the rain, everything changed. Jack didn't walk away again. Instead, he walked forward, with Claire by his side. They returned to the mountains not as a place to escape from the world, but as a place to build something new, something meaningful. The plan was simple but bold. Create a community-based tourism project that preserved the natural beauty of the land while empowering the people who lived there. Jack brought the idea, Claire brought the resources. Together they made it real. They traveled from village to village, meeting elders, learning traditions, listening to the needs of the people. They didn't come with checkbooks and blueprints. They came with open hearts. With every handshake and every meal shared around a campfire, trust was built. Claire stepped down from her role as CEO of Rowan Group, shocking the business world. She announced she would no longer be the public face of a company she no longer believed in, not in the same way. "I'm not walking away," she told reporters. "I'm just walking somewhere better." She took on an advisory role instead, redirecting funds into sustainable tourism, education, and local empowerment. The board balked. Her father protested, but Claire stood firm. And Jack, once a man with nothing but a backpack and a quiet heart, became a symbol of something bigger: authenticity, action, and love that wasn't afraid to get its hands dirty. Together they helped build schools in remote hamlets, supported local artisans, funded local water systems and bridges that would connect families across rivers that had divided them for decades. Children ran through the new classrooms shouting their names. Women taught Claire to weave. Jack worked shoulder to shoulder with villagers on trail maintenance and eco-friendly cabins. The project, officially called Pathway North, was more than development. It was a movement. Months passed, and the mountains bloomed again with wildflowers. Festivals returned. Spirits rose. Hope, once buried beneath snow and hardship, bloomed like the first crocus in spring. And then came the festival. It was a celebration of culture, of harvest, and of new beginnings. In the heart of a highland village, surrounded by terraced fields, bonfires were lit and drums echoed into the night. Colorful banners swayed in the wind. Children danced in circles, their laughter rising into the stars. Jack stood near the center of the village square, heart racing. Claire stood nearby, barefoot on the packed earth, hair braided with strands of red thread given to her by local girls. Her face glowed in the firelight. She had never looked more radiant, more alive. As the beat of the gongs slowed, and the village elder raised his hand for silence, Jack stepped forward. He turned to Claire, took a deep breath, and dropped to one knee. The crowd gasped. Claire's hands flew to her mouth. "I never thought I'd find you," he said softly, voice carrying through the hush. "And then, in the middle of a storm, I did. You changed my life in ways I didn't know were possible. You showed me that love doesn't need a palace, it just needs truth." He pulled out a small box. Inside was not a diamond, but a simple silver ring, etched with the shape of a lily, the flower that bloomed where they had first met. Claire's eyes filled with tears. "Will you keep building this life with me?" Jack asked. "Will you marry me?" She knelt down beside him, laughing through the tears, and threw her arms around his neck. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The crowd erupted into cheers. Gongs rang out, fireworks lit the sky, humble, homemade bursts of color that shimmered above their heads. And in that mountain village, far from the towers of power and the noise of the world, two hearts beat as one. Their love had survived storms, secrets, and scars. Now, it was ready to grow roots. 1 year later, the snow fell softly over the treetops, blanketing the mountain like a silent lullaby. The forest lay still beneath the weight of winter, each branch gently bowed with fresh powder. Nestled deep in that peaceful wilderness, a small wooden cabin stood warm and glowing, smoke curling from the chimney like a ribbon unfurling into the crisp silver sky. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of pine, firewood, and cinnamon tea. A soft golden light flickered from the fireplace, dancing across the wood-paneled walls and casting shadows that stretched and swayed like memory. Claire sat curled in an armchair close to the fire, her legs wrapped in a thick wool blanket, a notebook resting on the gentle curve of her growing belly. One hand held a pen, the other absently rubbed slow circles over the fabric stretched across her middle. She wrote slowly, carefully, her brow furrowed in thought. These words were not for the world, not for headlines or boardrooms. They were for herself, for the woman she had once been, for the girl lost in the snow, for the soul who had found meaning not in a skyscraper, but in the hum of a forest and the steady presence of the man who had saved her. Across the room, Jack had just returned from the trail. His boots left wet prints on the wooden floor, his hair dusted with melting snow. His cheeks were red from the cold, his breath still carrying the crisp bite of mountain air. He dropped his gear near the door and peeled off his gloves, his eyes immediately finding hers. "Still working on your masterpiece?" he asked with a grin, tossing his coat over the hook. Claire looked up, her eyes soft and shining. "I'm trying to tell it right, not just what happened, but what it meant, what it changed." Jack walked over, his steps quiet, reverent. He knelt beside her chair and placed his hand gently on her belly. "Our little one might end up being the best part of that story." Claire laughed softly, her fingers covering his. "He or she already knows how to do flips. I think they're training for the Olympics." He leaned in and kissed the top of her belly, then rested his head there for a moment. "I hope they inherit your fire," he murmured. "I hope they get your patience," she replied. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the crackle of the fire and the faint rustle of snow falling against the window pane. The warmth that filled the cabin wasn't just from the hearth, it was from the life they had chosen to build together. Their days were simple but full of purpose. The Rowan Path, the community tourism project they had founded together, had taken root and flourished. What started as a dream scribbled in a tent during a snowstorm had become a model of sustainable development, bridging cultures, building futures. Eco-cabins lined the trails. Local families hosted travelers, shared stories, taught traditions. Everything was guided by respect, respect for the land, for the people, for the connection between them. Claire used her name not to climb, but to lift. She no longer stood behind podiums or led board meetings, but her presence was everywhere. In the classrooms they built, the scholarships she funded, the programs she quietly supported. She mentored young women from mountain villages who once believed their voices had no place beyond the hills. Jack became something of a legend, the man who came from nowhere, saved an heiress, and stayed, not for glory, but for something deeper. He taught survival skills, led treks for at-risk youth, showed them how to find strength in themselves and in the wilderness that surrounded them. One evening, as snow continued to fall in thick, gentle flurries, Claire rested her head on Jack's shoulder. Her fingers traced small circles on his sleeve, the firelight warming their skin. "Do you remember the first night we met?" she asked softly. "In the storm?" he said with a smile. "Hard to forget." "I thought I was going to die," she whispered. "I remember thinking, well, this is it. But then I heard your voice." Jack turned toward her, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "And you didn't give up." "You didn't let me," she said. "You saved me." He paused, his voice low. "Funny, I used to think I was just passing through your life, like a gust of wind, here for a moment, then gone." Claire lifted her hand and laced her fingers with his. "But you weren't." Jack leaned his forehead against hers. "You were the home that made me stay." They stayed like that for a long while, two souls tangled in the peace that only love could bring. Outside, winter whispered its lullaby once more, but inside, there was only warmth, only light, only the soft beating of hearts preparing to welcome a new one. And though the world beyond their window lay frozen, spring had already begun inside their little cabin, quiet, unwavering, and eternal. And so, from a snowstorm that nearly stole a life, to a love that rewrote destiny, Claire and Jack's journey reminds us that sometimes, the people we least expect become the ones who change everything. Not with wealth, not with status, but with warmth, courage, and the kind of love that melts through every storm. They were from two different worlds, but their hearts spoke the same language. If this story touched your soul, made you believe again in unexpected love, second chances, and the quiet beauty of a simple life, then don't keep it to yourself. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another story that stirs your heart. Welcome to Soul-Stirring Stories, where every story is a journey home.